Hello soul craft lovers and welcome to another exciting tutorial, and I'll be showing you the part 2 on how I made this birthday top which I rocked. Stay tuned. Hello guys, welcome back once again, and these are the fabrics I had used. 2 yards of a pattern fabric and a yard of or should I say half yard will be enough for the sleeve, the wrist part of the sleeve. So I went ahead to use my pattern papers in the part 1 of the video. If you haven't watched that, please ensure you click on the first part so you could get the way and process in which I had cut this very top. So that's my piece which I had already cut. I decided to use the plain part for the front and the pattern part as the lining for the back. That's on the waist side of the front panel. The part you're seeing now is also the front panel, but that's for the bust to shoulder part, or should I say shoulder to the under bust section. So what I'm going to do now is I was marking the 1 inch spacing which I had given to it in the part 1 on the fabric, just so that I can know how to pleat it when I get to the sewing machine. You can notch these parts if you like. You can use a chalk to mark them as well. So I had marked the shoulder parts, and I also went ahead to mark the under bust section. So I'm doing that notching now on the under bust section. Like I said earlier, you could use a chalk to do it if you wish. And always make sure you store your patterns. You could use them some other time to create the same kind of design but in a different form. So I went ahead to notch both ends on each spacing, so that's it there, and I placed it back, and on those notched areas I used my chalk to mark them. Next thing you want to do is to use your office pins to pin them down, as well as finding the direction of how you want your pleats to go. This is not kissing pleats, this is just taking the pleats towards either the left side or the right side of your fabric. Another thing you must take note of is to measure the actual measurement of the shoulder, as you can see, as well as the actual measurement of the under bust horizontally, to be precise, horizontally. So now what you can see now is I just went ahead to cut the band on the wrist. I used about 6 inches width and my wrist circumference divided by 2 plus 1.5 inches allowance. So I took the back panel of the top where I had traced the darts with a chalk, and I'm going ahead to my sewing machine to sew on the dart lines. Darts always give fitting to a particular outfit. Where there are curves, it helps to exempt those curves and just makes the outfit fitted. So that's my dad there. Don't mind me. I was supposed to use the scissors to cut those threads, but I went ahead using my hands. But you have to be careful. If you must use your hand to cut out threads to avoid dragging the thread from the fabric as well. So that's the second part of the darts. I had to do a slow motion movement here for you so you could understand the folding. You must fold the darts in an angular form in order to sew on it. You could pin them as well to avoid it from shifting. So I was done here sewing the second part of my darts for the back panel. Don't forget we used 1/2 inch on both sides. Please try and watch the part 1 of this video to go a long way to help in understanding part 2 of this video. So that's my dart lines. I'm done here. If you can see, I didn't use a lining, I just sewed on the darts. So here I have 3 pieces of bands which I cut as 1.5 inches. I'll be using this to form a kind of bias, or should I say the button loops, the loop for the button. So these are my buttons. Although I got other size of buttons because I felt like, well, if I could design the wristband of the top, it would still be beautiful, even though I didn't use it again. So I went ahead to sew the band and used a broomstick to turn it to the other side. Sorry I didn't show that part of the video. But what I'm doing right now is to fold in each piece to form the loop according to the measurement I needed. So what I did here was to cut it by 2 inches. So you just have to cut the particular number of loops you'll be making on the button flap area of the top. So I just cut a few pieces. I think I used about 4 loop sizing. So that's that. I went ahead bringing back each part of the waist side. Now don't forget this particular top is classified into 3. The first portion is from the shoulder to the underbust. The second portion is from the underbust to the blouse length, and the third is the back panel. So what I'm working with now is the second part, which is the underbust to the blouse length. So I went ahead to fold in the loops I made. I hope you can see this. You fold it in, and the reason why we had to use 2 inches is because 1/2 inch or perhaps 1 inch will be used to sew inside of the fabric. So what you're doing is to fold in that particular loop, take it underneath the fabric, make sure that the loops are in between the first layer and the second layer of the fabric. So I went ahead also to measure how many inches for each loop. Here I used 1 inch to distance each loop from each other. 1 inch. You could use 1.5. You could use even 2 inches as well. Just depends on how full you like your buttons to look when you're done. So here I was done sewing the loops. You can see the excesses at the other end, and then I flipped it open to the other side and went back to the ironing table and ironed it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. So I didn't show the other part of the video where I had cut the lining portion for the upper part of the front panel. So what I'm doing now is I had turned it over and I'm going ahead to pleat it according to the measurement of the underbust line. Yes, you need to be careful as you sew through because you might make a mistake and think that you were actually sewing it, not knowing that you were sewing only one part. So as you sew through, you make sure you also arrange your fabrics. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm pleating it in one direction. I'm not scattering the pleats because I want it to face a particular direction. So for the left hand side of the top should be facing the left hand side. The pleats should be facing the left hand side, and for the right hand side, the pleats should be up facing the right hand side. I hope you understand what I just said now. Probably in another video, I will be showing you how to create pleats on fabrics as well. So make sure you hit the subscribe button to be notified whenever I post new videos. So if you notice, I created the pleats towards a direction and I continued to sew without the pleats. So the whole essence is just to follow that's just to make sure that the shoulder to the underbust part is the same length with the lower part. That's just the essence of the splits. So I flipped it open and this is what I have. I was done sewing it. Just arranging the fabrics to make sure it sits well and firm. So in the beginning, I used the sewing machine to hold the lining and the fabric together to avoid it from shifting because when I used pins to hold them, the pins tend to remove from the positions they were in. So this is the second part. You do the same thing and this is my blouse. I was done joining them. I was done with all of it. I just love the inner part of this blouse. It looks very, very beautiful and neat. Now, this is another band which I had cut from the pieces left from the fabric. I used about 1.5 or 2 inches. This particular part of the band was used to turn over the bottom part of the blouse because when I was done sewing, the edges from under the blouse were very visible. So in order to close it, I had to use a bias created from the pattern fabric. So here I'm sewing in my buttons. I'm sewing in my buttons, making sure that the knots are tight to avoid the buttons from removing. And if you notice, you could see chalk lines. Don't worry about the chalks. They can cleaned from the fabric. You can use 2 inches from each point. You can space the buttons by 2 inches. That won't be bad. You could also use 1 inch. It just depends. These buttons were medium sized buttons, so trying to bring them closer will make the top look somehow. So I just spaced them a little. So I'm just repeating a video again on those bands. The band I was talking about, I had sewn it under the fabric. So I went ahead to the weaving machine to weave, and now I attached my pressing button. We call this over here pressing button. It's different from the normal buttons, and when sewing it you must make sure that the needle and thread does not pass through the other side of the front part of the fabric. So that's my finishing. Wow, it looks so beautiful. And this is my blouse or my top. I just enjoyed the photo shoots when I was done sewing it. Most especially, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to share, like, and of course hit the subscribe button for more videos. Thank you.